Steve Perry. Steve Perry. Steve Perry. Steve Perry. And I should have been gone. Steve Perry. Huh?
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How you doing?
Great. Thanks
Appreciate
for doing
your time.
Yeah. Well, that watch, I know how to use it.
Awesome.
I listened to your last podcast, and I thought it was funny because the end of it, you were talking about Men in Black.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware of that, but I wrote the novelization for the movie Men in Black.
Oh yeah. We noticed that, and that was pretty awesome to see. I'm gonna have to pick up a copy now and read that one.
I thought it was better than the movie, but I'm prejudiced.
Yeah, I can believe that.
That's awesome. Where do you want to start off with today?
Well, first of all, if anyone's joining us here, so welcome Steve Perry to the Frog Brothers podcast. We are talking Shadows of the Empire, and actually, it's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we feel the same way too. So
yeah,
it's pretty exciting though. So, got to say we're big fans. Your work is touched us in many ways and different areas, and it's as we did some research besides the book, just seeing other areas you've influenced us. So you may or may not remember writing this episode of the Real Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yep, you got the writing credit on that one. So that was a household classic growing up.
Yeah.
So you've got quite the resume there. So what's it like to work with all these different broad sci-fi properties? What's that been like for you?
Oh, I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's somebody else has built a toy, and you get to go in and play with it. And so you don't have to come up with all the backstory and the structure. I mean, when you write your story, obviously you got to do your business. But the fact is that Lucas creates this great toy, and lets us play with it. And of course, there's some strictures. There's some things you can't do. And there are people that did things with it that I wasn't necessarily happy with, but hey, that's the way it works. It's his toy. So you go in, you get to play with it. And I mean, I got to do stuff like where did Batman learn how to fight? From Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did Conan get all those muscles from? I mean, when you work in some other universe like that, what does Darth Vader think about when he's sitting inside the hyperbaric chamber? I mean, this is cool. I get to write this stuff down. Where did they get the bomb? All these things. Where did the costume come from? It's like nobody wrote that down. Can I say that? Yeah, go ahead. So I think it's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You get paid well. You sell a lot of books. I mean, I'm still making money from Shadows of the Empire 25 years later. Not a lot, but and Disney's paying me, so that's even better.
Yeah.
Hey, 25 years later, that's amazing. And hopefully, if you had any character from Shadows of the Empire that could translate well to the modern Star Wars era, which character would you bring over?
Oh, I'd like to see them do something with Shizor. More than they've done. I mean, they've played with him a little bit, but and of course I killed him off. But of course nobody ever really dies in science fiction, fantasy. There's always a way to bring them back. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have done what they did in Wonder Woman either, but it's Spock came back, and I was okay with Spock coming back. So it just depends on how it's done. It always goes to how well do you pull it off? Can you write it? Can you direct it? Can you get the actors? And if you can pull all that stuff off, I mean, there's other characters that I played with in Shadows, but part of the joy for me was that I got to go in and fool around with icons. I mean, Darth Vader. That was one of the selling points. I got called up. The way you probably seen the backstory and how I got the job. But the way I got the job was because I'd written a novelization of a movie for Bantam Books. Tom Dupree was my editor, and he said, "Look, I got this deal. I got a movie novelization, and I got to get in a hurry. I need it fast. I don't really have any money to speak of, and would you be interested?" Because he was asking me a favor, and I said, "What? What's the project?" So it's The Mask.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey. He said, "Oh, hell yeah. I mean, this would be great. I mean, why wouldn't I want to be able to go and play with this stuff?" So I did it. In fact, I think it was one of the fastest novelizations I'd ever done. It took like 18 days or something like that. And so I got it done and sent in. He said, "Okay, I owe you one." I said, "Oh, okay, cool." what he gave me was Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, that's a pretty good return there.
Yeah, really good return on my money.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing I was going to ask you specifically because, they've expanded on Darth Vader, but in 1996, when Shadows of the Empire came out, that really set precedent. You had a lot of Darth Vader's inner monologue going on in there that we'd never really experienced before. We'd only had a glimpse. So, what influenced on how you wrote Darth Vader then at that time?
Well, that was one of the selling points that Tom Dupree said. You can have two villains. The Lucy Wilson, who was the head of the publishing section at that point. Lucy Wilson and Howard Rothman was there. Sue Rostoni, Leland Shee, people like that were all running this stuff, and they basically said, well, he was off limits. You weren't allowed to fool around with those characters in the novelization, which later became, not canon. But so part of it was like, well, I can have Vader. Well, my first question is what was he thinking about when he was sitting in that tank? Was he really? I mean, we know how it ends. We know where the book is set between, the movies that it's set between. So we know what happened before. We know what happened after. It's like, I don't know what this guy's thinking about it. I want to know about all the viewpoint characters, what they were thinking about when they were doing stuff that was in the original movies, because they don't really get into that very much. One of the scenes that I didn't get to write that I really wanted to write from Shadows was the scene where they pull the Falcon into basically a gas station and get out to use the phone. and so they're behind the guy in line that's talking to his alien girlfriend. I thought that'd been hilarious. They wouldn't let me have that, but they did let me have the other one that I wanted, which was having 3PO and R2 fly the Falcon. There's a scene in there where, not to give anything away.
Yeah,
but
yeah, near the final act.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, but the idea is there's a scene where they actually get to fly the Falcon, and they were neither one of them viewpoint characters. So the guy says, he said, well, you can't let you do that. They're not viewpoint characters. How are you going to pull it off? So I could pull it off. Well, no, we don't really want you to do that. I said, look, I promise I will write the scene as a drop-in set piece. If you don't like it, I'll just take the whole piece out and put in whatever you want. But I want to have that sequence where they fly the Falcon. And even though they're not viewpoint characters, well, you did it. It's all over the radio. You hear the other characters and they're listening to them fly the thing. So you don't see them and you don't really hear, what they're thinking. Although I think R2 is probably the smartest character in Star Wars, certainly the original movies. But you get a chance to play with something that you didn't get a chance to play with. So that's always the question. That's the questions that any fan would ask when you're watching a movie. What are you thinking? What's going on in your head? Why are you doing this stuff? And I got to answer those questions. I mean, it's like, how cool is that? Yeah.
I mean, you had to be completely excited to have that and say, hey, win that bargain there, write it up. And then, hey, we actually really like that. You executed just like you said you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said. They said, that scene you wrote? Yeah. Could you make it a little longer? I said, oh yeah, I could probably make it a little longer.
Yeah, I could pull that out for you. No problem.
Yeah.
No, I really liked the stuff on Vader you did with the descriptions where there's this touch of lightness in him that prevents him from completely collapsing into the dark side and stuff like that. That really helps you going into Return of the Jedi and stuff like that. It really, really does.
Well, it's backstory. When you write something, you write a series, and you have something interesting happen, and you get a chance to go back and kind of lay in the background. Sometimes it makes it more interesting, just in terms of, wow, everybody knew he had to have some bit of light left in him because, not again spoilers, but there's a sequence where he dies and everything, and they've changed his face since then. But the idea is, here's a guy that had to have some little bit of something left there, or else things not going to work. Instead.
It gave a little context around it. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
So as you got involved in this project, right, obviously we know this is a multimedia project. Lucasfilm described it as everything besides the movie.
Yeah.
So how much influence did you have in the other areas? I know there's the comic series that fills in part of the story. There's obviously the video game that fills in the story. Did you take the base story and kind of give some of the background to that, or how did that work get divided up?
It's pretty much. We had a big meeting at the ranch back when they were still parked at the ranch, and which is a great experience, by the way. Looks like a giant Methodist youth camp. I mean, there's all these buildings, and you walk in the buildings, and it's all the stuff that's from the movies. You know, and go over this. So we had this big meeting where basically everybody who's going to be involved in the project, either there or sent a proxy. They were there, or they sent somebody as a proxy, and so we started carving it up. Basically, the story conference was they had Shizor as the villain. Now, Lucy Wilson came up with the name Shizor because it's sort of loosely based on, I guess she had a boyfriend at one point who was Portuguese. And so the pronunciation of that XI is SH in Portuguese, apparently. And so they had the villain. We knew what he looked like. They had some of the ships already laid out. Even she had designed some of the ships that were going to be used. But there really was no story. We sort of knew vaguely who these people were, and of course the existing characters. We couldn't use Han Solo because he's in carbonite. So basically I had to come up with Han Solo Jr. I mean, that's Dash Rendar basically is the stand-in for Han Solo. So we just basically sat down at a big table, round table, and we just started throwing stuff out, and I'm taking notes. And it's like, so the game people say, well, could we have a motorcycle? I mean, the air cycle race, and and something. Yeah, sure, write that in. And the comic book people said, we want the Mandalorian. We want to have Boba Fett. And so, yeah, I can understand why. Sure, you got. So I basically been right about Boba Fett because I knew the comic book people were going to do it. Yeah. Now, as it happens, Dark Horse Comics is 20 miles from my house here. So once we started splitting it all up into different, I didn't really have anything to do with the games. It was all mine was the writing stuff. And so I talked to the people at Dark Horse who were working on the project. And I just basically said, well, you got a question, run it past me, and I'll compare it to what I'm doing in the book, and we won't get crosswise. So Killian Plunkett, there were several people that were just kind of going through the different pieces. And so we just parsed them out. And I came home and I wrote an outline, probably the most extensive outline for anything I've ever done. I think it was probably like 50 double-spaced pages. And they sent that in. And once they started approving and disapproving stuff, then we just the whole process was the way it was spread out was nobody steps on anybody's toes. Nobody says anything. Nobody puts any words out. We just write it and we just go from there. So yeah, I mean, I talked to the comic people, and then later on I wrote a sequel for Dark Horse. There was a 5-issue miniseries.
Evolutions, right?
Evolution, yeah, yep. Which they made into a graphic. I thought they did a pretty good job on that. The same deal. The artist for that group calls me up and talks, and I said, "Look, what do you like to draw? What kind of backgrounds do you want to put into the things? Oh, I like jungle. Fine, we got a jungle scene. Well, I like this. Okay, we'll put that in. And you just, because the story is fluid, you haven't really come up with any kind of plot, and so you can put these things in, and then as you go back and forth, they wanted Shizor to be a lot nastier than he was, and they actually wanted to have a sequence where Shizor and Leia get it on. And I said, no, we need no. Are you crazy? I don't want crazy Star Wars fans chasing me down, alleys with pitchforks and torches.
Right, yeah.
If I got a lot of hate mail as it was because Leia didn't, she would never do that to Han. Look, let me explain something to you. Leia and Han, they are real people. These are all made up people. We made these things up. But she didn't do anything to Han. Shizor came on, he hit her with the pheromones. They thought they were going to get on, and she gave him the knee and the cojones. That was the end of that. Well, I got people who were very unhappy with that. They blamed me for the Hildebrand trading cards. I don't know if you saw those. The Hildebrand brothers did a whole series of cards, and they were gorgeous. These guys, they could draw.
Yeah.
And one of them is Leia sitting naked on the bed. And you missed that one, did you?
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't got quite into the cards yet. I've been eyeing some of those on eBay, but
yeah, I've been looking at them.
I got the set early on. I had to go out and buy them because he wouldn't send them to me. But I went out and I found a place and I said, if you have a set of cards, yeah. Well, so I got them. But yeah, she's sitting on a bed, but she's combing her hair, and very artfully her arm is poised in such a way that nothing is visible here, and she's sitting sideways, so nothing is visible below there. But she was naked, even though you couldn't see anything. Right. Well, I got a lot of nasty comments about that. I didn't draw a card. Yeah, but you wrote the scene in the book. that they wrote that they did the cards from. Well, okay, I confess to that. You know, people get naked, they go to the bathroom, they take showers. That's, you know, you're not allowed to talk about that in some
Yeah.
franchise.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. I can
Right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I remember reading about some of that, and that's very interesting how people perceive that. And you know, glad you took a stand against that with them.
Well, they want it to be dark, you know, and they
Yeah.
tell me up front, look, you know, this is going to be the underbelly of Star Wars, such that it is. And we're going to have, you know, let's go down the road and have it be a little, you know, not bright and shiny. And so I you know, I'm perfectly willing to have, you know, people being murdered and done all this stuff, but some of these icons are really tough to screw around with.
Yeah.
And you know, I truly thought that no, this is not a good idea for me as a human being.
Yeah.
But when I started writing this, I got a call from another Star Wars writer who had written a couple of books, and we were chatting about it. And he said, "Don't tell anybody. Don't put on your book jacket where you live, because you'll be getting calls at 3:00 in the morning from Star Wars fans. It's at 3:00 in the morning. You don't care if they like it or they hate it. You don't want to be talking to somebody at 3:00 in the morning." And so I said, "Oh, that's a good notion." So I had already given the information. The city that I live in was on the inside of the, you know, the dust jacket cover. I said, "Is it too late to fix that?" And my editor said, "No, we just printed up. We haven't put anything in press yet. We just printed up copies." He says, I'll just have them go through and take that out and just put that you live in Oregon." I said, "Okay, fine." So he did that. So then he sent me 3 copies of the dust jacket that were the old ones. Well, the misprints, and they don't exist anymore. I have the only 3 copies of that exist, as far as I know.
Well, you lucked out with that one, so you saved
did.
you saved yourself a lot of late
Yeah.
nights.
Well, let's just double check here, shall we?
Yeah, go look and see it. It probably should say it lives in Oregon. It shouldn't name the city.
It's in the back here. Oh yeah. Yep, lives in Oregon.
Yep,
Yes,
it's as
yes,
vague as
but
you wanted it. That's perfect.
I had listed the city that I live in. He said that'll narrow it down. They can find you, and they probably can find you anyway. And some of them have, but the joy of it was I called up Steve Sansweet, who was the head of their. Sansweet's an interesting character. He was one of those guys that had a real job in the real world. He was a big collector. He had all the toys. He had everything. Lucasfilm started calling him up and asking him stuff. Next thing you know, he's running their program. He's writing books. He's doing all the stuff, working full time for Lucas. And I said, "These things worth these?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "They're probably not worth more than a couple $100 a piece now. Hang on to them. 25, 30 years down the line, people find out that there's only 3 of these things. Is this their Star Wars collectors that will call you up and offer you a blank check?" Wow, that'd be nice.
Yeah. So if there's anybody out there looking for one of 3, you might be able to reach out here in limited edition. So there's also the secrets of the Shadows of the Empire. So how much involvement did you have with that process? Did you do some interviews for that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I did. And the making of Shadows of the Empire, Mark Cartavaz's book. He and I talked a lot about that. He called up and asked questions and did. I can't tell you over the years how many interviews I've done. I've had a lot of people that ask questions, and some of the stories are really funny, and some of them are not so funny. But mostly, it was a great experience for me when I signed on. My editor at Bantam, Tom said, "These guys, there's not a suit in the bunch. These guys are all in it because they really love this stuff." And later on, some suits came in. Further down the line, there were some problems with writers in Star Wars. But when I was there, it was like, this is great. Everybody was happy. We were all rolling. We were doing what we wanted to do. We were just having fun telling stories. I mean, that's how it works the best. If you work on a show, something like Batman, the animated series, the reason that show worked so well is that everybody was a fan. They all loved it. They all wanted to do well. And, it had its ups and downs, but it was a lot better than some of the other shows. Same thing with Disney's Gargoyles. All the people that worked on Gargoyles were like super, fans of science fiction and fantasy and all that. Some of the shows you work on, it's like, they're toy shows. You angle in on the Doom drone and you watch it for a while because it's there to sell toys. I mean, a lot of that stuff you grew up with in the 80s and 90s was toy stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Transformers,
shows.
all those types of things. Now,
That's
see,
exactly
we're
what we
really
did there.
big Ghostbusters fans on our end, so that series was a bit unique because it was extremely well written for the time. It still holds up. We've kind of been going back and re-enjoying that, and I have 2 young kids, 2 young boys, and I've been showing that to them now, and they like it a lot. But that was one of those.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say
who
that
the
was
story editor was on Ghostbusters. Joe Straczynski.
Yep.
J. Michael Straczynski. Yeah, he was tough. He fought for us. We wrote some of the stuff we wrote. The network didn't want to let go through, and he stood up and said, "Yeah, this needs to happen." So yeah, again, there are people that don't get along well with Joe.
Sure.
We got along with him really well because he had our backs. So.
I mean, and you can tell the quality in a show like that that's not based around the toys, it's actually based around the story, because the real Ghostbusters was an afterthought. That, when they came up with the movie, that wasn't anything on their mind.
Yeah.
And that made all the difference in the world, right? So
it always makes a difference to me. The Harlan Ellison's line is first came the word. If it's well written, you're halfway home. If you get a good actor and good director, that's it. There's so many people that can screw up a movie or a TV series. Because everybody can lay hands on it. I mean, this, you're movie freaks. You go to movies, you watch these stuff. Everything's going along really well, and then something happens, and it's like, oh, why did they do that? I mean, I have to say, I'm a bigger fan of Solo than you are, and the reason why is that they use my martial arts. They actually mentioned it in the show, and that brought me back into canon, because otherwise I'm a legend writer.
Oh,
so Shadows
nice.
is a legend story, although they're starting to bring pieces of it back into the thing. So I'll eventually get back to canon status.
Yeah, you're getting there. From what I've read on the internet now, Dash Rendar is canon because he's mentioned in one of the novelization books for Solo.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
And I guess Seizure is he's canon only because at Galaxy's Edge they have a cookbook. And there's a Seizure salad in it.
Yeah, I think there's actually a cameo in one of them. Maybe in the pod race scene or something, where they were doing the little figurines, the little tiny ones, as background characters. I think Seizur's in there too, and so yeah. I mean, I don't feel bad that I'm not in canon. It's just kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is Star Wars fans respect legends these days. I mean, just because it's not canon anymore doesn't mean. I mean, we're making a podcast about it 25 years later. It's not canon, but we're still here doing it.
Yeah, we still love it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just see a lot of potential for the characters you made. Maybe not the specific story, but all that hard work you did on creating characters that people love and admire and look up to and appreciate. I just see a lot of potential future for them if they actually, hopefully, use those ideas.
I can't imagine that Disney's not going to mind those books, because it's the stories and stuff, the characters. You don't have to do the work.
Yeah.
You just go through and you just pick out somebody that's already established, and they've done it with other books like that. I mean, Tim Zahn's his characters, half of his characters are all canon now.
Like all that work.
And all back in the animated show. I mean, why would you go? I mean, you got it all later. When I first started writing, this is another of those little tidbits that I thought was fun. There was no map of the Star Wars universe. There was nobody knew how many planets there were, what the galaxy looked like, all the stuff. And so we were just making this stuff up as we went along. And the reason there were so many planets is that you didn't worry about stepping on somebody else's toes if you just made up a new planet.
Yeah.
So I'll come up with something that no one's used before. And then next thing you know, you got planets out the wazoo. So part of what happened was there was one guy, fan back to the day in the AOL days, which probably before you were born.
Oh, I was all over AOL, so I have a baby face
along there. So,
so I was on AOL, and a fan sent me a note. He said, I have gone through all of the movies and all the books and everything that were extant at the time, and I've done background on all the planets. I've listed them where they were, what solar systems they were in, and just kind of for fun. If you'd like to read it, I'll send it to you. I said, oh yeah, sure. So he sent me the ASCII file, and I read through. I said, this is great. So I sent it to Star Wars. I said, you need to call this guy, because he's got stuff going on that your writers need to know. And when you start writing, they would send you a CD, DVD, probably DVD now, a CD called the Holocron, and it had all of the information that you needed to write the story. And so they called the guy up and they hired him, and so he basically was the guy that wrote the book on the map of Star Wars.
That's awesome.
That's pretty incredible. Like, that's just a great story. Like, take your fandom and like let it pay off for you, maybe, right? There's always that chance that it can.
Well, especially in an organization where there's a lot of fans, because like Steve Sansweet, he was working for a big company. I know somebody Xerox at the Wall Street Journal, someplace making good money, and he really got into the toys early on. And the next thing he's the expert, and they're asking him questions. And the next thing he's the guy running their program. There, he moved out to the ranch, and there he is. It's like I think he retired recently. And it's like, hey, if you could make your fandom pay for it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like that's work, combined work and pleasure, right?
Absolutely.
So from what I understand, you basically are the person who conceived Dash Rendar.
Yeah.
That is one of those things that's incredible to me, because I was born in 91. So by the time Shadows came out, I was part of that surge where all their Star Wars marketing was returning for the special editions and Shadows of the Empire and all that, and the toys were coming out. So I was like right there, and it felt like it was just happening for me, So Dash Rendar has just always been part of my head canon in Star Wars since I can remember, since before the prequels and before everything. We started going back through last year, buying some of the old toys and stuff for it, just that we had as kids, because I found the old Outrider in one of our boxes in the attic, and we were just like, man, we gotta get more of this stuff and dive deep into it and learn more about it and just experience it again, because it's incredible. And I feel like it's all, like we were just talking about, it's going to start tying into the new stuff they're doing, which was what I was going to ask you, is how do you feel about Mandalorian and stuff like that? Have you been enjoying that?
Oh, hell yeah. Anything that you can take this in a new direction that nobody really saw coming. Nobody saw the Mandalorian coming. I was going to be one more story about Luke and Leia and Han. I looked at Dash as Han's younger brother. That's kind of how I would love to see them do something together. I think it would be great, but how these things work. You want somebody that's going to be interesting, that's going to draw people in, and it has some character stuff. And I was having a discussion online yesterday with somebody about some new incarnation, one of the Star Treks that he's watching, and he said, I'm watching the show and I watched the whole series, and these two characters never do anything except look. They don't have any lines. They're just, someone says something, they push a button, or they look like this. Does it get any better than this? And someone says, oh yeah, by the third season it's going really well. Well, about the third season, I'm not going to be watching it. If it's terrible in the first season, if it's terrible in the second season, I'm not going to watch the third season. Maybe it gets better, maybe it doesn't. Life is too short. But if you start out good, you start out with something that's interesting. The very first few episodes, I think, of The Mandalorian they were right there. At least that's what I thought.
Yeah, you're hooked right immediately.
It got better and better. It just if you pick up a show, I don't know, did you watch The Watchmen, the series?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you like those?
Oh yeah, it was incredible.
Well, and it started out that way. It opened up with the scene, the bombing of Tulsa, and you're going, holy crap. And then what are they going to do to follow this up? And who are these people? You start out with an interesting setup with interesting characters, and people will follow you anywhere. Why wouldn't they? This is fun. I'm enjoying this. Don't screw it up. That's what you start saying halfway. Yeah. Through. Don't screw it up. They wait for the last episode of Watchmen, going, oh, don't screw it up. Don't screw it up. The Abyss. That's another one that I watch. I like The Abyss. And I started watching, it was on Sci-Fi, and then they moved it over. It's like, because it does some things that I think a lot of science fiction doesn't do particularly well. And it's not perfect, but it's like anything else. It's like you get into something you like, you're interested in what's going on, you're going to go there. Why wouldn't you?
All right. So an important question to ask, and it's, because we obviously, I was born in 84, so I've got the generational gap, right? So my kids will clearly know what influenced me, but as also a musician, I have bands that I grew up on, but when you want to get deeper into something, you want to know what they were influenced by.
Yeah.
So what influenced you to get into sci-fi writing, and what are some of your biggest things that maybe aren't in pop culture zeitgeist currently, but are things that we should revisit because, they influenced you?
Oh, sure. I started out reading ghost stories when I was a kid, horror stories, ghost stories. And then just kind of naturally segued into science fiction because it was one of those, magical what if. I mean, my parents had mainstream books in the house, and they didn't read them. They were a book of the month club. They just put them in the bookshelf, and they looked nice there. And so I was reading Hemingway when I was 10 years old. I didn't understand it, but I could read it literally.
Yeah.
And so, that's the other thing is, you skip over the parts you don't know. And so I got into science fiction, and there wasn't a lot of it out there because I'm considerably older than you. And so you would go to this is the old days, to the drugstore, to the book rack, and you would pick up whatever science fiction book there was, and it cost a quarter or 39 cents or whatever, and you would take it home and read it. So you kind of got into it. So I got into a lot of the pulpy stuff, the science fiction and fantasy writers who did action adventure. Harry Harrison is a good example. But I read all the others: Asimov, Bradbury, Clark, Heinlein, all of the guys who were cranking stuff out for the magazines at penny a word, and then they started making their way into book form. So I read a lot of that stuff. And then as I got a little older, I got into some of the guys who were a little more complicated: Harlan Ellison, Robert Sheckley, people like that. And so that sort of formed my basic science fictional grounding, is that you tell a good story, you keep it interesting, you keep it moving. A.E. Van Vogt, there were guys that were writing just page turners. You couldn't put it down. You get to the end of it. And so those were the early science fiction influences I had. And then I was reading other stuff too. I was one of those geeky kids that wore glasses and sat at home and read when nobody would throw me out the house. So I was in the bedroom with books all the time. And so I read everything. I read Westerns, I read detective novels. I read, if I were sitting at the table at breakfast, I was reading the cereal box. That's just what I did. I was a reader. And then, of course, television came along when I was young. I'm the last of the radio generation. I can remember listening to The Shadow on the radio when I was a kid. And we got into television. And so we had black and white TV, and it was probably, smaller than your computer, about the size of a laptop. And Superman, The Adventures of Superman, the first television series, George Reeves. And then anything that came along, any of the science fiction and fantasy movies, we'd go see. We grew up in the 50s with the paranoid 50s, where they were running all of these, alien invasion movies, War of the Worlds. We'd go to like a double or triple or quadruple feature on Saturdays, and go in the morning and stay there all day watching movies, science fiction, fantasy, monster movies and stuff. Most of it was, they were terrible, but some of them were really good. The Day the Earth Stood Still, as a science fiction movie, it still holds up. It's still got one of the best spaceships ever made. If you walk in, to the ship and you're watching these waving his hand, things are going, that's so cool. And they did this in 1954 or something. So these, as me, a kid growing up in Louisiana, which is not necessarily the most enlightened of places, reading books and seeing movies like that. That's who I had as a basis for writers. And so when I started writing, I wanted to write stories that I would read if somebody else had written them. So that's why most of the stuff that I write is kind of pulpy. I mean, there's a lot of martial arts and weapons and space opera. Basically, that's the term that I use for most of what I do. And when we talk about that, that's what it is: space opera. You hop in your spaceship, zip, you're going across. So Star Wars is a natural. I mean, that's all it is. It's I know Kurosawa. I know about the Hidden Fortress and all of those things. But I mean, Lucas is just a little older than I am, and he grew up in the same time. And so that was influences on him. So
I think that really lends to why Shadows of the Empire struck such a chord with me, just because it fits so well with that original trilogy. And so, you being in that same age range and having those same influences, you're able to chew in and have a perfect kind of way to tell a compelling story there that we didn't necessarily knew we needed, but once you have it, you can't live without it.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like to think that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of delved back into the universe. I wrote actually I probably written 3 or 4 books. 2, 3, 4. Yeah. I used to write with a guy named Michael Reeves, so he and I wrote a couple of Star Wars novels together that were sort of basically like MASH in space.
Jedi Healers, right?
Yeah, Jedi Healer, yeah,
And,
Battle Surgeons.
Yeah,
and then we wrote Death Star, which was essentially what happened on the Death Star before it blew up. And there was one scene that was going to justify the whole book to me. Why didn't the guy pull the handle and blow that, blow the planet right out of the universe? He hesitated. So I got to write the sequence in that book where I don't know the Death Star necessarily worked as well as Shadows, but there was the sequence where the guy is going to pull the handle and blow the planet up, and he hesitates. I want to know, why did he hesitate? Just a second. So I got to write that sequence. I went inside the character's head, and so now I know why he hesitated and why the Death Star got blown up. At least that version of the Death Star. So yeah, that's one of those things that I want to write books that I would read if someone else had written them. That's sort of my basic criterion for a novel that I'm working on. Sometimes I get there, and sometimes I nobody's perfect. We don't all bat 1,000, but that's what you shoot for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you also wrote an episode of Extreme Ghostbusters, which we're one of the few people out there, Ghostbusters related, who really like that show, actually. And even we've been going through episode by episode. We're about halfway through that series. We've actually already reviewed yours, and I think that's the one that has like one of the best reviews we've done. And that is
that's pretty much
one of the best
glowing
episodes
review
of that show, because there's some that kind of just fall through and they feel a little bit fillery.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people just miss the other Ghostbusters. I was happy to see new stuff, and I was young enough that it didn't matter to me. It was a great show, but watching it back, that episode is one of the best, if not the best of that series.
Well, it's, you do what you can with what you got. And I mean, I was a fan of Ghostbusters. I mean, how could you not be a fan of Ghostbusters? And so, when I got a chance to write for the series, it was like, yeah, sure. And I didn't know who Joe Straczynski was at the time. But my buddy Reeves lives in LA, and he was writing a lot of animation. He'd probably written more animation than any 5 guys that I know. He did it for years and years and years. And so he would say, well, do you want to work on this show? And yeah, sure, why not? So it was kind of fun. It paid well. I mean, this is the thing about writing for television, even animation, which is like the salt mines of TV. You don't really get paid very well for animated shows. The union was really bad for a long time until they sort of hooked up with the WGA. And so you would, people go like, that's terrible money. I mean, if you write an episode of a live action show, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. And, you write an episode back when I was writing of any of the shows that I was working on, you're looking at anywhere from $1,500 or $1,800 to as much as $5,000 or $6,000. But I could turn out one of those in 3 days. And if I was in a real hurry and I had an outline approved, I could do one in 1 day, because it was only a 22-minute show, which basically meant the script had to be about 40 pages long. Yeah. And it was a lot of action. There was no explanatory long stretches of dialogue. It was, this is it. And when you write animation, I don't know if you really play with the scripts and stuff, when you write animation, it's a director's script. You write everything. You write where the camera is, you write where how many people are in the shot. You describe everything, because it's going to go to an animator, because somebody's going to storyboard it, but then it's going to go to an animator in Japan or China, and they're going to basically use the storyboards that your storyboard artist took from the script that you wrote. And so it's all visual. I mean, there's if you go through and read some of these scripts, they'll be 20 pages long, and like the dialogue will be like 2 lines in the middle of the page, and there's a lot of action, and there's 2 more lines. And so that's the process. It's basically comic books that move. Yeah. Which is why I didn't have any trouble writing comic books when I sat down to write them. I said, oh, okay, it's just animation with the pictures don't move.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's pretty intriguing. So do you recall the first animated series you wrote for?
I think it was Centurions. I think my first, and that's another funny story. And I don't want to run over your time, but Reeves lived in LA and I was living in Oregon. And so he said they're really big. Before, this was before the internet became something. We were at one point sending scripts back and forth by mailing floppy disks to each other.
Oh, yep.
Or sending them over CompuServe at 300 baud, which is about as fast as you can type. So he said, you need to come down here and go to these meetings with me on some of these shows, because they're having like a cattle call. They're inviting a bunch of writers to come in. They're going to lay out the characters, and they're going to show us the toys and the examples and the Bible. And then, they want FaceTime. They want to see who you are. They want to be able to talk to you. And so I said, okay, fine. So I went down to go to the Centurion show, which was a toy show. I mean, essentially that's another one of the toy shows. But it had some really decent writers who were interested in working on it, and a good story editor. And so we go into this big meeting, and there's like 20 writers. We're all sitting around the room in different places. And they bring out the model of Jake, or Ace, one of the Centurions, with he has the rotating cannon on his chest. I think it's Jake. And so they were asking questions like, excuse me, but which way does Jake's cannon rotate? Clockwise or counterclockwise? And they knew clockwise. Okay, write it down, because you don't want to say something wrong when you write the script. And I'm sitting with myself thinking, you were grown men sitting in this room talking about which way Jake's cannon rotates. I mean, give me a fucking break. And so I can use that word, right?
Oh, yeah.
Speak freely with us.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard us say words.
You've listened to us, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard your show, so I'm assuming it's okay. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, but I'm thinking, I want the job, because I'm going to make $2,000 or $3,000 for 2 days work, and I can't make that kind of money do anything honest. And so I'm sitting there trying to keep my faith. And across from me is a writer, and I'm going to mention him by name because it's the one he's written, Michael Cassett, who's written a lot of live action stuff, including zombie pictures and movies and stuff. So he's been in business for a while. This was one of his first gigs too. So he's sitting across the table, and they're going on about Jake's cannon, about the motors on the back, and I look up at Cass that's giving me that grin that your little brother gives you at the table when your father says, "Don't you make any noise? Don't you shut up." And you're going to laugh, and your brother's egging you on. Go ahead. So Cassett's over there doing this. I'm going, don't look at him. Just look somewhere else. Don't pay, because if I look at him, I'm going to laugh, and if I'm going to laugh, they're going to throw me out, and I'm not going to get this job. And so I used to rag him about that when I'd see him once in a while. I said, yeah, you're the reason I got into this business. Reeves dragged me in there kicking and screaming. But if I had kept looking at you, I wouldn't have written any cartoons at all. Mm-hmm. They would have thrown me out the door for going, you got to be kidding me.
For sure. You
have to take it. This is the other thing. If you're writing for a show, you really have to take it seriously. You can't thumb somebody in the eye. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Shadow movie that came out a few years ago. I listened to Shadow on the radio. I read those books when I was a kid. And so when they did the movie, they were camping it. They were camping it up. They were playing it. It looked great. It had some good stuff in it, some great sequences in it, and it was like this general story was there. But they were just kind of always winking at the camera just a little bit, about if you watch it, if you haven't seen it recently, watch it again and look for that, and you'll notice it. It's like, there's a little tongue in cheek here. I'm going to say this line, but I don't really mean it. And so you can't do that if you're writing something. If you're writing, unless that's the intent of the thing for it to be that kind of farce, you have to play it straight. You have to write straight. That's the reason Star Wars worked. Some of the dialogue in those first movies is just, I mean, if you go back and you watch it with the eyes of someone who knows the story in the movies and likes these people and knows all the history and knows about the actors. Yeah. You're giving it a pass that a lot of people weren't going to give it a pass when they saw it. And some of the dialogue is just like, it's a groaner. You certainly could have done better than that. But it succeeded despite that. And so
absolutely,
it's because they played it straight. They didn't. You never saw basically Harrison Ford look at the camera going, "I got to say this line. This is what they're paying me for." It's like what happened to Bruce Willis. He just kind of comes up, shows up, waves his hand, collects his check, and goes home. He used to be a really good actor. He used to do some really good movies. Yeah. Some of the stuff he's done lately, it's like you have to kind of back up to collect your check because you didn't really do anything to earn it except to stand there and be Bruce Willis.
Yeah, you became
not Bruce, and I'm
yeah. So, when you start getting comfortable as who you are as a role versus taking on a character role.
Yeah.
I think everyone, big names get to that sometimes. So
We're talking about Fifth Element this week, so we know about some Bruce Willis.
Yep.
Oh, I'd say, yeah. And I think when he was on, I mean, I liked The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
How could you not like The Fifth Element? It's a great movie.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, we all get that way. As you get further up the ladder for whatever field you're in, you start sometimes taking yourself a little too seriously. And the next thing you know, you're producing stuff that's a little on the bombastic side, and then you just start to think, you know, all these people tell me how great I am. You start agreeing with them. The writers that I know that are the best, they don't do that. They, you know, I correspond with David Gerrold. He wrote Trouble with Tribbles amongst many other things. And, you know, it's always like, God, I worry that I'm going to pull this off in the next book, you know. And, Jesus, you've written more books than God. You've got racks and racks of books, and they've sold. You've done this, and you're famous. But he doesn't rest on his laurels. He doesn't say, okay, I can just phone this in. It's real easy sometimes to say, well, I'll just dash this off. But if you're writing for somebody else's property and it's a shared universe, you have to put as much juice and energy into that as you do writing your own original stuff. Otherwise, you're a hack. And I don't mind being called a hack, because some of the stuff I've written, I kind of had to grit my teeth and get through it. Long about the fourth or fifth Conan novel, I was going bananas, you know, because Conan doesn't change. Conan, it's the same at the end as he was at the beginning. Conan, by the time he's 30 years old, would be one huge keloid, because he would have been cut so many times with so many swords. If he picked up his arm, his foot would come off the ground. He would be a mass of scar tissue. And Conan's way of dealing with any kind of opposition was whip out his sword and cut it down, number one. Number two, whip out his sword and cut it down. That's all Conan knew how to do. And he never was the same. You can't lop off an arm or have him change philosophically, because his arc goes from the time he's about 15 until he's in his 60s. And so you know that you have to stay with those elements. But good fiction is about change. And so you have characters that are coming up. I mean, one of the reasons Star Wars works as well as it does generally is that they start with a character who's at this point in their life, and they had a life before, and they're going to have a life after. And that's what you do. I'm just going to show you this piece. But if I just show you this piece and it looks like he just came into being right now, and after it's over, he doesn't exist anymore, then that's not a good arc. It doesn't give you anywhere to go. Whereas if you assume there's a backstory, even if you don't know what it is, if it's between the lines, it matters. If you assume there's going to be a post story unless you kill him off, then it's like, okay, I'm just going to show you this piece of this person's life, and I'll keep it interesting. But there was more, and it was interesting, and there's more after that, and it's going to be interesting too. So that for me is what it's compelling as a reader or as a viewer. You know, I want to see a movie when it gets to the end, I'm going, oh man, no, I want to show me some more. When's the next one coming out? You know,
something's doing a great job is when it leaves you with more questions than it actually answered, because you just want to dive deeper. You just want to know what's next or what happened before.
Yeah, and you know it, and you hope it's coming back. I mean, that's the reason episodic television works, is you want to see what they do this week. Well, I know what you did last week. Yeah. I mean, if you have a favorite character and you want to follow them, you want to follow them. It's not that McDonald's makes the best food in the world. It's always the same. You know, when you go into McDonald's in Poughkeepsie, it's going to be the same as the McDonald's in Pacoima. I mean, that's what the people go for, the experience. And some of the fiction that I read, some of the characters, some of the episodic stuff I read, is like, I really like these people. No, I don't really care what they do. I just want to watch them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's the characters, not necessarily the story around it. But that's great.
I had one more thing I wanted to ask you about, which was a quote I read in the Secrets of the Shadows of the Empire last night about, you were talking about living here in the future. I wanted to see if you had any updates on that now that we're 25 additional years into the future and things are wildly different.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an old science fictional joke. Isn't it great to be living here in the future?
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid growing up, compared to now, all the stuff we're doing now was in the future. You know, we're talking online. I'm using my iPad, which is on a stand, to Zoom. That concept existed in Dick Tracy's television radio, but it didn't exist in the real world. So as the future has come along, it's like, wow, you know, I sort of didn't see this happening in the future. I mean, you know, you You could go to Kmart and buy an electronic watch that kept better time than the most expensive Swiss chronometer ever made for $9. And when it died, you just threw it away because it was cheaper to get a new one than to buy a battery and have it fixed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of what happens. Is that 25 years on, I'm still amazed that I'm making any money, and I'm not making a lot of money because it's it's 25 years on. But I still get people that buy the books. Every once in a while, I'll get a note from somebody that says, "I just read Shadows of the Empire, really liked it." You speak to a passing parade. So yeah, I mean, the joke is, yeah, the future has gotten here, but compared to where I was, if you go back, 1 or 2 generations before your parents, you're looking at people that, I mean, 2 generations back from my parents, my great grandfather was born in the 1800s. He rode around in a wagon. I mean, and we've come a long way in what I think is a relatively short amount of time. So, yeah, I'm amazed that I still get calls from people or notes saying, Shadows of the Empire, wow, that was so cool. Well, thank you. I thought it was pretty cool myself, but but I'm kind of surprised that it's still out there. Because you don't really expect. I mean, when you write literature, that's the definition of literature, is that it lasts. It keeps going. A book that's 200 years old, people are still reading it and getting off on it. That's literature.
Yeah.
I'm writing for like somebody's going to the 7-Eleven store and they see a book and they see a 6-pack of beer and they get the book instead of the beer, and then they go home and they're glad they did. That's my audience. I mean, I'm writing for people who are going to read it, maybe leave it on the plane when they're done with it. But did I entertain them while they were on the plane when they read the book? That's all I want to do. Tell them a story, and if they like it, I did my job. And if they don't like it, I didn't do too well, and I'll try better next time. So that's like philosophically, that's moving into the future. I want to do. Well, by the way, I just noticed those microphones. That's cool. I've seen those. This guy that makes these, is he in Oregon? The guy that makes those microphones,
These microphones are blue microphones. They're the Blue Sparks. So there's probably something similar on the other model. I think they're based out of California, though.
Yeah, because I've got a Blue Yeti for my computer. Oh yeah, that's cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, you're all right.
So I think we pretty much covered everything. Really appreciate your time today. Do you have any projects coming up that are releasing soon, or anything you've been working on you want to touch on real quick while we got you?
Sure. Well, not really. It's going to be any good because I've been lazy lately. I have a book. I wrote a series of books about martial art bodyguards in the future, and the series runs a dozen books or so. And then my company decided they didn't want to do any more, so I stopped writing them. But I wanted to wrap it up, so I'm doing. It's called the Matador series, and they're action adventures, space opera stuff. And I wanted to do one more book in the series, so I'll probably just go straight to Amazon or one of the other platforms when I get it done. But I've been lazy. I'm 250 pages into it, and I'm just kind of poking along. Nothing else really active. I write a lot more short stories now because they're easy. You track a short story, do it quickly and get it out, and just publish. You don't have to worry about it. So, yeah, nothing else. I'm working on a couple of movie projects with Mike Richardson and Dark Horse, which may or may not ever see fruition, and I can't really talk about. But
sure. We know comic books can wind up in limbo for a while. So.
Oh yeah, and movies too. And my movie experience has been, you just sort of never know where it's going to go, and sometimes you get paid, and that's good. But so far, none of my movies have made it to the screen, which is not as good.
Well, better late than never. We'll cross our fingers for you and hope you get to the big screen sooner than later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to your review.
We'll be sure to screen it by you before we talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It'll be great it would be great, let's say, to see you return to Star Wars. If they ever asked you again, do you think you'd be down?
I'm not sure. I have to stop saying that because they've asked me a couple of times and I've turned them down. The reason I came up with an idea for entertainment in the Star Wars universe, where we were going to get into the whole idea of like rock bands and music stars and people doing all that stuff. And we thought it'd be a great idea. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. We want you to put these people in it. And it's like, no, we don't want to put those people in it. We want to do something else. And they said, well, yeah. So we declined. Later they came back and they said, we'd like you to kind of deal with this a little bit. I still didn't want to do it. And Reeves said, is it okay if I do it with my new collaborator? I said, yeah, sure. So he actually did write a book on the Star Wars universe. But yeah, I wrote an Indiana Jones book instead. They asked me, well, you're not going to do the Star Wars, would you like to do an Indiana Jones book? Yeah, I had done one of those, sure.
That's a fair trade, I would say, right?
Yeah, I thought so too. And it's all about zombies. And, I've got two different kinds. I've got chemical zombies and I've got magic zombies. I had a great.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
It's
We're
a
going
little
to get
talk,
into that too.
Well, Indiana's getting on in age, and this book was in the 40s. He was already middle-aged then, so God knows what they're going to do with the next movie. If they have any brains, and I don't want to waste your time, but if they have any brains with the next Indiana Jones movie, what they'll do is they'll start out with how old he is, and they'll deal with it. They won't have him swinging on the thing.
Oh, right.
They'll have him fight smarter and not harder, because Ford can do that. He's good enough actor; he can pull that off. And you could have a ball with that. You need to hire an old guy to write it.
Yeah.
Somebody who knows what it's like to get out and creek, and then you could have all that stuff with him, like taking a yoga class or Tai Chi, or doing something where he's trying to get in shape and realizing he's never going to make it.
He's past his prime there, maybe.
well past his prime.
Oh, great. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Steve, and we look forward to seeing what you do next, and hopefully maybe some more Star Wars if we cross our fingers, and hope you find a project that you like enough to write as we'd much.
Hopefully they can seduce you.
To
the dark side.
Well, I'm not holding my breath. I'm not sure how the mouse regards me these days, but I appreciate you having me on your show, and break a leg. I hope that it draws some readers.
All right,
we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Thanks.
These are my dinner guests, the Frog Brothers. Frog Brothers. These are my dinner guests, Frog Brothers. Frog Brothers. These are my dinner guests, the Frog Brothers. Frog Brothers.
Steve Perry.